Months had passed since the incident on Sanctus Lyce, or perhaps it had been years. Time, in the chaotic, blood-soaked crusade the Doomslayer waged, had become a fluid, meaningless concept. He was a force, a ghost, a green-armored legend that had begun to spread through the terrified whispers of the imperial citizenry and the formal panicked reports of its military. He was Anomaly Primus, the unsanctioned, the heretic saint. His existence was a paradox that the Imperium could not solve. He was a being of singular, impossible purpose. He appeared on worlds drowning in the grip of chaos, drawn by the stench of the warp as a shark is drawn to blood. He asked for no aid. He obeyed no authority. He simply arrived, and in his wake, he left only silence, ash, and the broken, dismembered corpses of daemons. On the hive world of Gathus, he had emerged from the underhive vents and single-handedly shattered a Genestealer cult's uprising, mistaking the four-armed Xenos for just another breed of demon. On the Forge world of Rycarnia, he had fought his way through a full-scale incursion of Tsinkian daemons, his rage a tangible physical force that shattered the illusions of the Chaos Sorcerers, his shotgun a brutal counter-argument to their complex metaphysical schemes. He was a force of nature, a holy terror whose methods were a blasphemous mockery of imperial doctrine. He used no sanctioned rites. He spoke no litanies of faith. He fought with a speed and a fury that was utterly alien. His green armor impervious to weapons that could slag plasteel. His arsenal a collection of brutal, effective tools that tore apart the Archenemy in ways that left even veteran inquisitors speechless. He was the Imperium's greatest weapon, and he was its greatest heresy. For in a galaxy defined by faith in the God Emperor, the Doomslayer's power came from a source that was utterly, terrifyingly his own. On Holy Terra, the throne world of mankind, in the hallowed, cavernous chambers of the Senatorum Imperialis, the High Lords of Terra were in a state of suppressed, cold panic. The chamber was dark, the only light coming from the towering, holographic displays that showed the galaxy, a galaxy now pockmarked by the usual, expected brushfires of heresy and alien aggression, and one new, jagged green line that was carving its way across Segmentum Obscurus. Anomaly Primus. "He has appeared again," spoke the representative of the Adeptus Terra, his voice a dry, bureaucratic rustle. On the cardinal world of Ophelia VII, a full-scale Khornate uprising was concluded by his presence. He fought his way to the source, as he always does, annihilated a bloodthirster of insensate rage, and then vanished. The local ecclesiarchy is in a state of religious schism. Half are calling him a new saint. The other half are demanding his immediate execution as a heretic. A different voice, this one the booming baritone of the Lord Commander of the Astra Militarum, slammed a gauntleted fist on the table. He is a menace, an uncontrollable variable. He ignores all imperial authority. He has walked through Akkadian blockade. He has shoved a standing captain of the Imperial Fist chapter who attempted to engage him. He is a rogue element, and his actions, however beneficial, are an insult to the command structure of the Imperium. He is also a third voice, this one cold and precise, belonging to the inquisitorial representative, the single most effective anti-demonic asset this galaxy has seen since the days of the Primarchs. His kill tally is astronomical. He does not just banish daemons, he destroys them. Their essences do not return to the warp, they are unmade. A heavy, terrified silence fell over the chamber. A being who could inflict true death upon a daemon was a weapon of unimaginable, world-ending power. A weapon they did not control. "He is a theological paradox," the ecclesiarch hissed, his face pale. "He fights the Archenemy, yet he shows no faith in the God Emperor. He wears no aquila. He recites no litanies. He is a hero who is, by his very existence, a blasphemy. His victories are as dangerous as his defeats would be. Every world he saves is a world that has witnessed a power other than the Emperor's divine will." The conclusion was unspoken, but unanimous. The anomaly could not be allowed to continue his rogue crusade. He was a destabilizing force that threatened the very foundation of their faith, the bedrock upon which their entire imperium was built. "Then what is the recommendation?" the Lord Commander asked, his voice low. The inquisitorial representative's eyes narrowed. "We cannot kill him. We have tried. A full company of Tempestus Scions, supported by Leman Russ battle tanks, failed to even slow him. He is, for all intents and purposes, physically indestructible." He paused, letting the weight of that statement sink in. "If we cannot destroy him, and we cannot control him in the field, we must find another way. We must bring him here." "To Terra?" the ecclesiarch gasped. "Bring that thing to the throne world? Heresy." "It is not heresy," a new, cold voice said, cutting through the debate. Inquisitor Valerius Kryptman of the Ordo Malleus stepped from the shadows, his face a mask of grim resolve. "It is necessity, and it is the will of the Master of Mankind." The gaze of every High Lord in the Senatorum Imperialis turned to Kryptman. He was a man who walked in shadows, a ghost of the Ordo Malleus, but his reputation was absolute. He was the Imperium's reluctant, and only, expert on Anomaly Primus. "I have been observing the anomaly since his first appearance on Sanctus Lyce," Kryptman stated, his voice flat, his hands clasped behind his back. "I have studied the picked feeds. I have analyzed the psychic echoes. I have debriefed the survivors, and I have come to one simple conclusion. The Slayer is not a being you can negotiate with. He is not a man you can threaten. He is a force, like a solar flare or a tectonic shift. He has one singular, all-consuming purpose. He hunts daemons. He does not sleep. He does not rest. He does not falter. He simply hunts. Then he is a tool." The Lord Commander of the Astra Militarum boomed. "A weapon. Point him at the Eye of Terror, and let him feast." "You cannot point a hurricane, Lord Commander," Kryptman retorted, his voice sharp. "He goes where he senses the greatest corruption. We have no control over his path. His very presence in the Imperium is a theological crisis. He is a hero who is not ours. He is a savior who does not ask for our faith. And that, gentleman, is a more dangerous threat to the stability of the Imperium than any daemon." He paused, letting the cold, hard logic of his statement settle. "And now, the situation has escalated. I am no longer here as a simple representative." He produced a small data slate, its casing the black and silver of the highest inquisitorial authority. "I am here on the direct, unassailable authority of the Senatorum Imperialis, acting as one. The order has been given. It is no longer enough to observe. My mandate is absolute." Kryptman's face was a mask of cold iron, but his eyes betrayed the sheer, impossible weight of the task before him. "I am to lure the anomaly. I am to contain it. And I am to bring it here, to Holy Terra." A wave of shocked, protesting murmurs swept the chamber. "The God Emperor himself has taken notice," Kryptman continued, his voice silencing all protest. "He has felt this other anathema in his galaxy. And his will, unspoken but absolute, is that this entity be brought before the Golden Throne. He must be assessed, he must be understood, and, if necessary, he must be unmade." The High Lords were silent. The order was not just from them. It was from him. Kryptman turned to leave, his long, black coat sweeping behind him. He was now the most powerful and most doomed man in the Imperium. He had been tasked with the most impossible mission in galactic history: to catch a storm, to leash a god of rage, to bring the Doomslayer to heel. Kryptman's first stop was not a fortress or a fleet, but a dark, silent chamber on the dark side of Luna, the bastion of the Eclipsed, a secret way station of the Ordo Malleus. He stood before a towering, silver-armored giant, Brother Captain Matthias of the Grey Knights. Matthias had not left Kryptman's service since the Sanctus Lyce incident. His mind, like Kryptman's, was consumed by the paradox of the Slayer. "You have seen the directive, Brother Captain," Kryptman said, his voice flat. "The High Lords wish for me to catch a hurricane in a bottle. The anomaly cannot be caught," Matthias rumbled, his voice a low, psychic vibration. "It is a force of pure, untempered rage. It does not feel fear. It does not respond to reason. It only kills. Precisely, Kryptman agreed. You cannot trap a hurricane, but you can predict its path. And you and I, Captain, know what this storm hunts. It hunts daemons. It seeks the source, as it did on Sanctus Lys. If we are to lure it to Terra, we cannot ask it. We must trick it. Matthias's silver-armored hand clenched into a fist. You speak of heresy, Inquisitor. To lure it would require demonic bait. Exactly, Kryptman said, his eyes cold and pragmatic. We cannot find a daemon primarch or a prime evil, as the anomaly's fragmented data calls them, and simply move it to Terra to act as bait. That is impossible. Therefore, we must create one. The silence in the chamber was absolute. What Kryptman was proposing was beyond heresy. It was a sin of unthinkable magnitude. You would summon a greater daemon? Here? In the Sol system? Matthias's voice was dangerously low. No, Kryptman said, raising a hand. Summoning is crude, uncontrollable. No, we will not create a real demonic entity. We will create a signal, a psychic beacon. A lure so potent, so steeped in the very essence of what the anomaly hunts, that he will be drawn to it from across the galaxy. He will see it as the source he has been hunting for all this time. Matthias was disgusted. You would use a choir of astropaths to sing a song of chaos? You would light a fire in the darkness and pray that only one monster comes to its light? This is madness. It is necessity, Kryptman countered, his voice sharp as a razor. The anomaly's rage is a unique, focused frequency. We will not be singing a song of chaos. We will be forging a key tuned to the very nature of his own argent-fueled power. We will project a signal that mimics the energy of a hell priest or a prime evil, an energy signature so powerful that he will believe he has finally found the heart of the invasion. Kryptman stepped closer, his gaze locked with the Grey Knight's glowing blue lenses. I cannot do this alone, Captain. Your Grey Knights are the only beings in the Imperium who can create a psychic shield strong enough to contain the ritual, to protect the astropaths from being consumed by the very signal they are creating. I need your faith. I need your strength. I need you to be the walls of the furnace while I forge the heretical beacon that will save this Imperium. Matthias was silent for a long, agonizing moment. This was heresy. This was a violation of every oath he had ever sworn. But it was also an order from an Inquisitor, backed by the will of the High Lords, and perhaps even the Emperor himself. We will be the walls, Matthias finally said, his voice a low, tormented growl. We will protect the ritual. But know this, Inquisitor. If your lure escapes our control, if you unleash a true plague upon this system, my next act of faith will be to purge you. Kryptman nodded, a cold, thin smile on his lips. I would expect nothing less, brother Captain. Let us begin. The ritual was prepared on a consecrated black ship, a silent, dark vessel hanging in the void over Titan. It was a place accustomed to holding back the horrors of the warp, its very hull inscribed with wards of banishment. In its central, lead-lined chamber, 1,000 astropaths, their faces pale and their eye sockets empty, were arranged in a great, concentric circle. They were the choir. In the center, Inquisitor Kryptman stood, his staff of office in hand, his mind a fortress of cold, hard logic. Around the chamber, Brother Captain Matthias and his entire brotherhood of Grey Knights stood in a ring of silver and faith. They were the shield. They began their litanies, their collective, psychic will forming a great, shimmering dome of sanctified energy over the chamber, containing and focusing the power. Begin, Kryptman commanded. The astropaths began to sing. It was not a song of words, but of pure psychic energy. They reached into their own minds, into their connection with the warp, and they pulled forth the essence of corruption. They focused on the echoes of the Slayer's own psychic signature, the data Kryptman had meticulously collected. They began to weave a signal of false darkness. It was a raw, chaotic, and terrifyingly dangerous thing. The signal was a beacon of pure, negative emotion, a scream of agony and rage that immediately began to attract the wrong kind of attention. The hull of the black ship groaned as unseen, immaterial things in the warp began to claw at its surface, drawn to the psychic feast. The astropaths began to scream, their minds faltering, the signal wavering, threatening to collapse into a true, uncontrolled warp rift. "Hold the line, brothers," Matthias roared, his own psychic power flaring, reinforcing the failing wards. "Faith is our shield. The Emperor protects." But it was not enough. The signal was too powerful, too chaotic. The ritual was failing. It was then that a new power entered the chamber. It was not a sound. It was not a presence. It was a change. A sudden, absolute, and overwhelming shift in the very nature of reality. It was a wave of pure, unimaginable, golden psychic light. It descended from an impossible distance, from the heart of the Sol system, from the throne world itself. The Emperor of mankind, from his golden throne, had taken notice. He had felt the ritual. He had felt Kryptman's desperate, heretical gamble, and he had felt the Slayer's own, raging soul, a beacon of pure, anti-chaos fury, adrift in his galaxy. His will, an infinitesimal fraction of his godlike consciousness, descended upon the black ship. He did not just amplify the signal. He seized it. He took the raw, chaotic, screaming psychic energy of the astropaths, and he forged it. The chaotic red light of the ritual was instantly consumed, replaced by a single, focused, and terrifyingly perfect beam of golden energy. The Emperor, with his ancient, pre-human knowledge, reached into the very essence of the Slayer's being. He shaped the signal to resonate not just with the warp, but with the Slayer's own, argent-fueled origins. He made it feel like the energy of a hell priest, a deceiver, a prime evil. He filled it with a psychic scent that the Slayer's instincts would find irresistible. He did not just create a lure. He created a summons, a psychic command that screamed, on a level only the Slayer could hear. "Source, the ultimate threat, final prey, come, face me." The astropaths collapsed, their minds scoured clean by the brief, terrifying touch of their god. The Grey Knights fell to their knees, their armor weeping holy tears, their souls overwhelmed by the sheer, magnificent power they had just witnessed. Kryptman stood alone, his body trembling, his cold logic shattered by an undeniable religious awe. The lure was active, a perfect, golden beacon of false darkness, now shining across the galaxy. A silent, irresistible call aimed at the heart of Anomaly Primus. The trap was set. The daemon world of Celis was a rotting, fetid paradise of Nurgle. The air was a thick, buzzing miasma of corpse flies. The ground was a swamp of filth and decay. Great, fleshy trees wept rivers of pus. In the center of this plague garden, a great unclean one, a greater daemon of Nurgle named Pustulus the Magnificent, sat on a throne of diseased corpses, giggling as Nurglings played in its own, exposed entrails. It was a scene of perfect, grotesque, entropic peace, and the Doomslayer was in the process of rectifying it. He was a green blur of absolute, cleansing violence. He had been on Skelis for 3 days, his Praetor suit's filters working overtime to purify the toxic air. His crusade against this new plague hell was proceeding with his usual, brutal efficiency. He was currently standing on the chest of the great unclean one, his chainsaw buried to the hilt in its massive, bloated skull. The daemon roared, not in pain, but in a kind of jolly surprise, even as its physical form began to dissolve. It was in this moment of gory triumph that the signal hit him. It was not a sound. It was not a vision. It was a feeling of absolute, fundamental wrongness that instantly dwarfed the passive, decaying evil of the Nurgle daemons. It was a psychic spike, a javelin of pure, concentrated, and familiar malice that lanced across the galaxy and struck him directly in the soul. It was the energy of the deceivers. It was the power of the hell priests, of the Khan Maker, of the source of all his torment, but it was stronger, 1,000 times stronger. It was a presence so powerful, so arrogant, and so utterly, blasphemously foul that his entire being reacted with a sudden, violent, and absolute surge of pure, cold rage. He ripped his chainsaw from the daemon's dissolving head, the creature's death now an irrelevant, forgotten detail. He stood up, his helmet turning towards the sky, his senses fixed on this new, ultimate threat. This was it. The signal he had been unconsciously hunting for his entire life. The source, the heart of the entire demonic invasion, the prime evil, the Vega fragment in his suit, which had been struggling to classify the chaotic energies of the warp, suddenly found a signal it could understand. It was not a guess. It was a perfect, screaming, undeniable match to the Argent-based signatures of his deepest, most hated enemies. Massive, unidentified energy spike detected. Vega's voice, unheard for weeks, suddenly blared in his helmet, its logical processes running at 100% for the first time in this new galaxy. Energy signature is a 99.9% match for Maker-class demonic entity. Classification: prime evil. The Slayer's fists clenched. His purpose, which had been a general, chaotic purge, now had a singular, ultimate focus. Origin of signal. Vega continued, its voice calm, but the data it presented was world-ending. Sector, Sol, Quadrant, 0, 0, 0. Planetary designation, Terra. Terra. The name meant nothing to him, but the coordinates were a destination. The signal was a challenge. He had his target. The true god-demon of this new, infected galaxy. He would go there. He would kill it. He would end this war, the same way he had ended all the others, by ripping and tearing. Until it was done, the Slayer's new purpose was absolute, but a logistical problem remained. He was on a daemon world, a festering swamp of filth in the heart of chaos-held territory. His target was Terra, the heart of the Imperium, a place a galaxy away. He was a god of war, but he could not fly through space. He needed transport. He raised his head, his helmet's visor scanning the diseased purple sky. He saw not just the swirling clouds of the warp storm, but the shapes that moved within it. Ships, great, looming, cathedral-like vessels of corrupted metal and screaming flesh. The Chaos Fleet that had brought this plague to Skelos. He had his transport. He began to move, a green streak of purpose through the swamps of Nurgle. He was no longer hunting daemons. He was hunting a ship. He found his target. A smaller, faster word-bearer's strike frigate, the Fideus Infernus, which was resting in a low, precarious orbit, acting as a command and control vessel for the surface assault. His method of ascent was direct. He fought his way to the highest peak on the blighted planet, a great, rocky spire that scraped the toxic clouds. He waited, his eyes on the orbital path of the frigate. He tracked its trajectory. And then, he jumped, aided by a surge of his own argent-fueled power and the thrust of his boots. He launched himself into the thin upper atmosphere, a human missile aimed at a target moving at thousands of miles per hour. He slammed into the Fideus Infernus's lower hull, his gauntlets locking onto a viewport, his boots magnetizing to the metal. He was in the void of space. It meant nothing to him. His Praetor suit was his world. He drew his crucible, its red blade burning with a heat that was not of this world, and he began to cut. He carved a circle in the ship's adamantium hull, a perfect, molten ring, and then kicked the slab of metal free. He was inside. The ship's interior was a heretic's nightmare. Corridors were slick with blood and offerings. Traitor guardsmen and corrupted crew members knelt in prayer before obscene 8-pointed stars. They looked up, their prayers turning to screams, as a green, armored giant, wreathed in the cold vacuum of space, stepped into their midst. The purge was swift. He moved through the ship with the single-minded purpose of a virus. He did not care about tactics. He cared only about reaching the bridge. He tore through Chaos Space Marines in their own hallways. He punched through bulkheads. He threw crew members out of the very hole he had created. He reached the bridge. It was a dark, Gothic cathedral of a room, its viewport a great, arched window looking out on the spiral arm of the galaxy. A corrupted navigator, his third eye a weeping, cancerous sore, shrieked as the Slayer entered. The traitor captain raised his plasma pistol. The Slayer's shotgun ended the confrontation. He tore the captain from his command throne and threw his body through the viewport, the plasteel shattering, the vacuum of space venting the last of the heretics. He stood at the navigation console. It was a complex, arcane array of human technology and demonic ritual. He did not understand it. He did not need to. He could still feel it. The signal, the golden, psychic lure, a beacon of prime evil, screaming at him from across the galaxy. It was a magnet, and he was the iron. He did not enter coordinates. He did not plot a course. He simply laid his gauntleted hand on the navigation console, closed his fist, and pushed. He poured his own, furious, indomitable will, his singular desire to reach his prey, into the ship's corrupted systems. The ship screamed, the engines roared, the unstable warp drives, forced into activation by a sheer, brute force will they were never designed to obey, tore open a hole in reality. The Fideus Infernus, now a ghost ship piloted by a single raging purpose, plunged into the immaterium, its course set not by calculation, but by instinct. It was a bullet, aimed at the heart of the galaxy. It was aimed at Terra. The journey through the immaterium was a nightmare. The hijacked frigate was not protected by a Geller field. It was a ship of chaos, and the demonic entities of the warp swarmed it, clawing at its hull, whispering promises of power and madness through the bulkheads. They felt the Slayer's pure, cold, anathema rage within, and they hated him, but they also feared him. His will, his rage, was a beacon of pure, non-aligned destruction that even the daemons of chaos recoiled from. He sat on the command throne, a silent, green king on a throne of heresy, his presence a shield of pure, concentrated spite that kept the ship's interior sanctified. Then, he burst from the warp. He emerged not into the quiet void of deep space, but into the most heavily defended star system in human history, the Sol System. His arrival was an immediate, system-wide declaration of war. A corrupted word-bearer's frigate, appearing from an unscheduled, unplotted warp jump directly above the orbit of Mars. The response was not a hail. It was not a warning. It was annihilation. The Solar Fleet, the glorious, golden armada of the Adeptus Custodes and the Imperial Navy, was waiting. The Phalanx, the colossal, moon-sized mobile fortress of the Imperial Fists, was in high anchor over Terra, its weapon batteries already glowing. Hostile vessel detected. A voice screamed across 1,000 Imperial bridges. Hereticus extremis. By the light of the Astronomicon, purge it. 100 lance batteries, weapons that fired beams of pure, coherent light, lanced out from the Imperial fleet. They converged on the Fideus Infernus. The corrupted frigate, a vessel that had survived 1,000 battles, did not even have time to raise its void shields. It was vaporized. The ship, its crew, its very existence, was turned into a cloud of expanding, superheated plasma in a single, silent, overwhelming volley. The threat was neutralized, but the Imperium was not fighting a ship. It was fighting the man within it. The Slayer had felt the targeting locks, the sudden, overwhelming surge of energy. He knew the ship was doomed. It had served its purpose. It had brought him to his destination. Minutes before the fleet opened fire, he had strode to the ship's drop bay. He had climbed into the last, remaining Dreadclaw drop pod, a corrupted, fanged instrument of planetary assault. As the ship's alarms shrieked their final warning, he had simply punched the activation rune. The Dreadclaw was launched, a screaming, black meteor, just as the Fideus Infernus was erased from existence behind it. His pod, now a lone, tiny, and almost undetectable target, screamed down towards the brilliant, blue, green, and gold marble of the planet below. It was the planet from which the psychic signal emanated, the planet he knew only as Terra, the throne world. It streaked through the upper atmosphere, a spear of heretical iron aimed at the heart of the Imperium. Orbital defense platforms, guns the size of cities, tried to track it, but it was too fast, its trajectory too steep. It crashed. It slammed into the ancient, holy ground of the Imperial Palace itself, its impact a ground-shaking cataclysm that shattered a kilometer of priceless, millennia-old statuary and punched a deep, smoking crater into the outer precincts of the most fortified structure in human history. The Slayer had arrived. He emerged from the smoking, molten wreckage of the drop pod, his Praetor suit hissing as the cold, Terran rain hit its superheated plating. He stood in a vast, open plaza, a place of impossible, Gothic architecture and continent-spanning scale. Everywhere he looked, there were statues, saints, primarchs, and a single, recurring, eagle-winged symbol. The psychic beacon, the prime evil, was close. Its power was an oppressive, suffocating weight that made the very air tremble. He had landed in a war zone. The moment his pod crashed, the entire sector of the Imperial Palace had gone into total lockdown. Klaxons wailed, their sound echoing off the impossibly tall spires. Searchlights cut through the rain, and from every gate, every barracks, every doorway, the defenders of Terra poured forth. They were not the terrified, disorganized cultists of Sanctus Lyce. They were not the chaotic, savage orcs he had faced. This was the elite of the elite, the final, desperate line of defense for the human race. Regiments of Solar Auxilia, their void-sealed armor and las rifles, a disciplined, shimmering line of steel, formed a perimeter. Sisters of Battle, their black power armor and white-flamed bolters a testament to their fanatical faith, chanted hymns as they advanced. And at their head, a wave of brilliant, defiant yellow strode the Astartes of the Imperial Fist's Legion, their bolters already roaring, their captain shouting orders to fortify the position. They saw the green, smoking figure in the crater. They saw the non-imperial armor. They saw the profane, chaotic arrival. To them, he was not a savior. He was the vanguard of a new, terrifying chaos assault. "Heretic!" A Sister of Battle screamed, her voice amplified by her helmet's vox. "Die in the name of the God Emperor." They opened fire. A solid wall of las fire, bolter rounds, and flamer fuel washed over the crater. It was a storm of firepower that could have leveled a small city. The Slayer rose from the crater, his Praetor suit smoking, but utterly unharmed. The las bolts had dissipated against his armor. The bolter rounds, even the Astartes grade, had merely chipped his paint. He looked at the sea of soldiers before him. They were human, yes, but they were chanting, praying, fighting for the very entity he had come to kill. They were not soldiers, they were cultists, guardians of the prime evil, and they were in his way. His arsenal was fully loaded, his argent energy high. He drew his chain gun, the barrels spinning to life. The battle for the outer palace began. It was not a battle, it was a purge. He was a green, unstoppable force of nature. He moved through the Solar Auxilia, their disciplined lines breaking in terror as he tore them apart with his bare hands. He was faster than their reflexes, his armor impervious to their weapons. The Sisters of Battle met him with faith and fire. Their flamers washed over him, but his suit, forged in the fires of hell, did not even register the heat. He seized their leader, a Sister Superior, and used her as a shield before throwing her, and her faith, into a squad of her own sisters. The Imperial Fists were a true challenge. They were Astartes. They met his charge with their own, holding the line with bolter and chainsword, but they were fighting a demigod of pure, focused rage. He was stronger, faster, and his purpose was colder. He tore their bolters from their hands. He shattered their chainswords with his doom blade. He was a force they could not contain. He was a one-man army, and he was carving a bloody, unstoppable path through the heart of the most well-defended fortress in the galaxy. He was not just fighting. He was on a crusade. And he was getting closer to the source of the beacon, closer to the prime evil on its throne, closer to the Eternity Gate. The battle for the outer precincts of the Imperial Palace was a study in absolute, overwhelming force. The Imperial Defenders, the finest soldiers of a galaxy-spanning empire, were reduced to a bloody footnote in the Slayer's relentless advance. Their courage was meaningless. Their faith was irrelevant. A Leman Russ battle tank, its heavy cannon designed to destroy bunkers, fired a point-blank shell into the Slayer's chest. The explosion was deafening, a flash of fire and shrapnel that should have annihilated any target. The Slayer was thrown back, his armor smoking, But he rose, staggered for a moment, and then charged the tank. He leaped onto its chassis, tore the heavy turret from its housing with his bare hands, and then ripped the crew from within. The Imperial fists, seeing their armored support destroyed by a single, unarmored, in their view, infantryman, fell back, forming a new, desperate defensive line. Their captain, a proud son of Dorne, roared a challenge, his power fist crackling. The Slayer met his charge, caught the power fist with one hand, and with the other, drove his doomblade through the captain's chest, lifting him into the air before casting him aside. The defenders broke. Their discipline, their faith, their courage, it all shattered in the face of this unstoppable, green-armored juggernaut. He was not a soldier. He was a force of nature, a plague of destruction. He moved through the vast, cathedral-like avenues of the palace, his every step a thunderous, resounding thud that echoed in the silence of the fleeing defenders. He was a silent, walking apocalypse, his path marked by a trail of broken bodies, shattered armor, and the smoking ruin of Imperial war machines. He was not just killing. He was purging. In his mind, these were not human soldiers. They were the fanatical, brainwashed cultists of the prime evil he had come to kill. They were the guardians of the Hell Priest, the final, desperate line of defense for the source of all demonic corruption. Their pleas for mercy, their screams of, "For the Emperor," were, to his ears, nothing more than the heretical babble of the damned. He left a river of white, black, and yellow armor in his wake. Sisters of battle, Imperial fists, solar auxilia, they were all just obstacles. He finally reached his objective. A vast, open plaza, the size of a city, lay before him. At its far end, a gate of impossible mythological proportions towered into the artificial sky. It was forged of pure, golden oromite, its surface inscribed with the deeds of the Emperor and his primarchs. It was the Eternity Gate, the final, unbreachable entrance to the Sanctum Imperialis itself, and it was here that the true defenders of Terra, the final, golden wall against all darkness, stood waiting. The battlefield fell silent. The sounds of bolter fire and screaming faded, replaced by the low, respectful hum of tens of thousands of Imperial soldiers holding their breath. Before the Eternity Gate stood a single, golden line, 100 warriors. They were taller than even the Imperial fists, their armor a work of Baroque, golden artistry, their plumed helmets hiding faces of grim, perfect resolve. They carried massive guardian spears, their tips crackling with energy, and they stood as still as the statues of the heroes that lined the plaza. They were the Adeptus Custodes, the companions, the Emperor's personal bodyguard, and they had not stood in such numbers, against a single foe, in 10,000 years. The Slayer stopped. He stood alone in the vast, empty plaza, a lone, green warrior facing a wall of living gold. He felt their power. It was immense. A cold, disciplined, and utterly uncompromising will. These were not mere cultists. These were the true guardians, the final, elite challenge. He raised his super shotgun. Clack, clack. The sound of the reload echoed in the vast, terrible silence. The final battle was about to begin. The silence in the Plaza of Heralds was absolute, a profound, heavy void between the two opposing forces. On one side, the Doom Slayer, a singular, green-armored entity of pure, unadulterated rage, his shotgun held at the ready. On the other, 100 golden demigods, the Adeptus Custodes, a silent, immovable wall of faith and perfected, genetically engineered fury. At their head stood Shield Captain Colquhoun. His golden armor was more ornate than the others, his resolve as cold and as hard as the oromite he wore. He had been given one, simple order by the Captain General himself. Let nothing pass. He looked at the green warrior, the anomaly that had torn through the outer defenses of the palace, as if they were paper. He saw no fear in the creature's posture. He saw no sign of reason. He saw only a beast, a monster of immense power that had to be put down. "You have come far, heretic," Colquhoun's voice boomed, amplified by his helmet's vox, a sound of pure, aristocratic contempt. You have defiled the holy ground of the throne world with your profane presence. You have slaughtered the faithful servants of the Emperor. But this is the end of your road. This is the Eternity Gate. And here, you die." The Slayer didn't respond. He simply took a single, heavy step forward. It was all the signal the Custodes needed. They did not charge as a mob. They did not roar like the berserkers of Khorne. They moved as one, a single, flowing, golden tide. They were not just soldiers. They were the single most deadly fighting force in human history. 100 individual demigods moving with the perfect, synchronized grace of a single organism. The battle began. It was a clash of two entirely different and equally unstoppable philosophies of war. The Custodes were duelists. Each one was a master of 1,000 different combat forms. They flowed around the Slayer like a river of gold, their guardian spears stabbing and slicing, their energy blades weaving intricate, impossible patterns of death. They were too fast, too skilled, too perfect. A single custodian was faster than the Slayer. His combat precognition, honed by centuries of war, allowed him to anticipate the Slayer's clumsy, brutal swings. He would dodge, weave, and strike, his spear aimed at the joints, the visor, the weak points in the Praetor suit. But the Slayer was not fighting a duel. He was a force of nature. He was not a target. He was the target. He met their perfect, artful attacks with raw, unadulterated brutality. A spear would stab at his throat, and he would simply catch the shaft in his hand, his grip shattering the adamantium. He would pull the custodian in and shatter his helmet with a single devastating headbutt. Another custodian would leap from above, his blade descending. The Slayer would absorb the blow on his shoulder pauldron, the armor groaning but holding, and he would answer with a point-blank blast from the super shotgun, the sheer, concussive force sending the Golden Warrior tumbling back, his armor breached. He was a whirlwind of green. He was not outfighting them. He was overwhelming them. His rage, his sheer, unkillable, argent-fueled resilience was a factor they had not, and could not, have trained for. He tore a guardian spear from one custodian's grasp and used it as a club, smashing two others from his path. He drew his chainsaw and met a roaring sentinel blade in a shower of sparks before driving the spinning teeth into the custodian's chest. He was a wolf in a den of lions. The lions were stronger, faster, more skilled individually. But the wolf had a rage, a purpose, a sheer, bloody-minded need to kill that they could not comprehend. Shield Captain Colquhoun, seeing his perfect golden line beginning to falter, his brothers, his companions, being torn apart by this single, monstrous berserker, felt a cold, alien emotion. Rage. He roared a challenge and charged, his own spear a blur of motion. He was the fastest, the strongest, the best of them all. He met the Slayer in a flurry of blows, his skill so profound that even the Slayer was forced back, his armor sparking, his suit's integrity alarms beginning to wail. But the Slayer did not break. He simply endured. He took the blows, he absorbed the damage, and he waited. Colquhoun, in his fury, overextended, a single, perfect thrust aimed at the Slayer's heart. The Slayer caught the spear, his fist closed around the blade itself, the energy field causing his gauntlet to glow white-hot. He did not care. He pulled Colquhoun towards him, and with his other hand, he drove his doomblade deep into the shield captain's chest, punching straight through the Oromite breastplate. Colquhoun froze, a look of shocked, profound disbelief in his eyes. He looked down at the green, glowing blade in his chest, and then up at the impassive, green visor of his killer. The Slayer ripped the blade free and kicked the shield captain from his path. The golden wall was broken. The last, greatest, physical defense of Terra had failed. The Slayer turned his back on the remaining, horrified Custodes. He left them to their wounded and their shame. He strode towards the Eternity Gate, his target, the prime evil, now just beyond it. He was wounded. He was bleeding. But he was unstoppable. The Eternity Gate, a wonder of the dark age of technology, a structure of Oromite and psychoconductive circuitry that had held back the full, undiluted might of Horus's legions, loomed before him. It was a solid, unbreachable wall. The Slayer raised his fist. He was preparing to punch his way through, to spend the next hour, the next day, however long it took to pound this final obstacle into dust. And the gate opened. With a low, deep, and impossibly ancient groan, the great, golden doors, 100 meters high, swung open. Not with a mechanical precision, but with a slow, deliberate, psychic will. A silent invitation. The Slayer paused, his fist still raised. This was new. A trap? An ambush? He did not care. The path was open. The beacon of the prime evil was screaming at him from the darkness within. He lowered his fist and strode forward. He stepped from the blood-soaked, rain-swept plaza into the heart of the Imperium, the Sanctum Imperialis. The change was absolute. The room, if it could be called that, was a cavern of impossible scale, so vast that the ceiling was lost in an artificial, starless night. The air was cold, dry, and thick with the scent of ancient incense and ozone. The only sound, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, was a low, multi-voiced, psychic chanting. 1,000 souls, whispering in unison, a sound of prayer and of agony. He was on a great, black causeway, stretching forward into the gloom. And at the far end of that causeway, a light, a single, golden, and impossibly powerful light. He began his final approach, but he was not alone. 2 figures materialized from the shadows, blocking his path. He recognized them. Inquisitor Kryptman, his face pale but his eyes burning with a cold, analytical fire, and Brother Captain Matthias, his silver Terminator armor scarred, his Nemesis Force halberd held in a 2-handed grip. "This is it, then," Kryptman whispered, his voice trembling slightly. He looked at the Slayer, a being he had hunted, a being he had lured, a being he now stood before in the most sacred place in existence, the anomaly, before the throne. Matthias stepped forward, his face a mask of absolute, religious, and terrified resolve. He had felt the Emperor's summons. He had been ordered to stand here, to be the final, theological test. "Heretic!" Matthias's voice boomed, his faith a weapon in itself. "You have defiled this holy place. Your journey ends here. You stand in the very presence of the God Emperor of mankind. Lay down your arms. Repent and accept his judgment." The Slayer looked at the Grey Knight. He saw the silver armor, the glowing weapon. He felt the psychic power. He did not see a man of faith. He saw a guardian, a priest, a final, elite cultist, protecting his god. He raised his super shotgun. "No!" Matthias roared, a sound of pure theological agony. "You cannot! Not here!" He charged, not to kill the Slayer, but to stop him, to block his path, to prevent this ultimate act of blasphemy. The battle was brief. It was brutal. It was utterly one-sided. The Slayer, his patience at an end, his prey just beyond his grasp, did not have time for this. He met Matthias's charge with a force that was absolute. He sidestepped the halberd, his fist slamming into the Grey Knight's chest. The blessed Terminator armor, which had withstood demonic assaults, cracked under the sheer, physical, argent-fueled force. Matthias was thrown aside like a broken doll, his armor sparking, his body broken, but his soul still alive. Kryptman, the man of logic, did not even move. He simply stood, his eyes wide, as the green giant strode past him, his gaze fixed on the light at the end of the hall. "May the Emperor forgive us all," Kryptman whispered, as he watched the Slayer, the unstoppable, unthinking, and utterly heretical force of nature, begin his final, blasphemous ascent to the Golden Throne. The final chamber was a place of profound, terrible, and holy silence. The chanting of the 1,000 psychers was a distant echo, the air itself a solid, crushing weight of psychic energy. The room was a cathedral of impossible scale, its vaulted ceiling lost in a darkness that seemed to drink the light. And at the far end, upon a raised dais, was the source, the beacon, the prime evil he had crossed a galaxy to kill. It was a throne, a machine, a monstrous, baroque, and impossibly complex construct of gold and black cables, tubes, and arcane machinery. It was a life support system and a psychic amplifier, a prison and a divine engine, all in one. And upon it sat the source of the signal. The Slayer stopped. He stood before the golden throne, his super shotgun held at a low ready, his mind struggling to process what his eyes were seeing. It was not a Hell Priest. It was not a Titan. It was not a Daemon Primarch. It was a corpse, a desiccated, skeletal, mummified body, its frame impossibly large, ancient beyond comprehension. It was fused to the throne by a million wires and tubes. Its skeletal hands, which were the size of a man's torso, gripped the armrests. Its mouth was a black, silent, lipless scream. Its eye sockets were vast, empty pits of shadow, from which a faint, ghostly, and impossibly powerful golden light emanated. This was his target. This was the primeval. This was the God Emperor of mankind. It was a trick. It had to be. A demonic illusion, a final, desperate lie. He raised his shotgun. But the psychic signal, the overwhelming, powerful, and utterly foul presence he had felt, it was pouring from this thing. This dead, broken, enthroned thing. His entire purpose, his entire crusade, had led him to this. A dead king on a throne of gold. He was not a warrior. He was an executioner, and his quarry was already dead. A surge of pure, unadulterated, and almost disappointed rage flooded his system. He had been led here on a fool's errand. This was not a god. This was a corpse. He would end this farce. He would purge this last, pathetic, glowing idol, and the universe it had infected. He raised the BFG 9000. He aimed it directly at the skeletal face of the Emperor of mankind. He began to charge the weapon, the green Argent energy building, a sun of pure destruction in the heart of the holiest place in the new galaxy. He was about to pull the trigger. You are unexpected. The voice was not a sound. It was a detonation. It was 1,000 to 1,000 suns exploding in his mind. It was a wave of pure, golden, psychic light, so vast, so powerful, that it threw him to his knees, his Praetor suit's systems screaming, his own primal rage momentarily extinguished by a force of sheer, unimaginable, cosmic will. He was on the floor, his BFG clattering from his grasp. He looked up, his helmet's visor crackling with static. The corpse on the throne had not moved, but its empty black eye sockets were now filled with two burning, golden orbs of pure, blazing starlight, and they were looking at him. You are a paradox, the golden voice thundered in the Slayer's mind. It was not a voice of malice, like the Hell Priests. It was not a voice of temptation. It was a voice of immense, ancient, and bone-crushing weariness. It was the voice of the Emperor of mankind. The Slayer pushed himself to his feet, his rage returning, a shield against this new, psychic assault. He grabbed his shotgun, his instincts screaming at him to destroy the source of the voice. You are anathema, as am I. You burn with a rage that is not of the warp. It is pure. It is your own. It is magnificent. The Emperor was not just speaking. He was showing. He poured a torrent of information directly into the Slayer's mind. It was not a trick. It was a raw, unfiltered data stream, a final, desperate plea for understanding. The Slayer saw it all. He saw the dawn of humanity. He saw the Great Crusade, a glorious, galaxy-spanning war to bring a rational, atheist truth to the stars. He saw the 20 demigod sons, the Primarchs. He saw the ambition, the love, the hope of a father for his creations. And then he saw the betrayal. He saw the Horus heresy. He saw brother turn against brother. He saw the galaxy burn. He saw the true enemy, not just daemons, not just monsters, but a force of fundamental, conceptual evil. The Chaos Gods, Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, Slaanesh. Beings of pure, malevolent emotion that fed on the very souls of all living things. He saw the Emperor, a shining, golden warrior, strike down his favored son, Horus, and in that act, be mortally wounded himself. He saw the agonizing internment upon the golden throne, a desperate, last-ditch effort to keep his physical body alive, his mind a burning, psychic lighthouse in the darkness, the Astronomicon. I am the shield, the Emperor's voice explained, the words laced with an eternity of suffering. I do not sit. I sacrifice. My mind is the wall that holds back the abyss. My light is the beacon that guides the last of mankind. And my body is the prison that prevents my soul from being reborn as the god they so foolishly pray to. He showed the slayer the purpose of the lure, the desperate, heretical gamble. I saw you, a fire in the darkness, a rage that was not of chaos, a weapon. I drew you here, Slayer. I drew you here not to be my slave, but to be my successor, my final, terrible sword. I can no longer act, but you can. They must be ripped. They must be torn. Until it is done, the Emperor was recruiting him. He was offering him a purpose, a divine mandate, to be the Emperor's wrath, the one who could go where he could not, and kill what he could only hold at bay. The Slayer stood in the heart of the Sanctum Imperialis, his shotgun held low. He had been shown the ultimate truth of this galaxy. He had been offered the ultimate mission. The Emperor's psychic plea hung in the vast, silent chamber. It was an offer of alliance, of a shared, divine purpose. He had shown the Slayer the why of this galaxy's eternal war. He had shown him the true, cosmic scope of the enemy. The Slayer listened. He understood. His mind, which had been a simple, straightforward engine of destruction, had been given the one thing it never had: context. He saw the Chaos Gods. He saw the great enemy, and he recognized them. They were the same demons, the same evil that had destroyed his own world, his own family. They just wore a different mask. A new, cold, and even deeper rage began to burn in his heart. A rage against everything. He did not reply with words. He replied with his own truth. He opened his own mind, his own soul, which had been touched by the seraphim, which had been forged in the fires of hell, and he showed the Emperor. The Emperor, in his golden agony, felt the Slayer's life. He felt the first invasion of Mars. He felt the betrayal by his own, mortal commanders. He felt the loss of Daisy. He felt the eons of war, the endless, grinding, solitary crusade. He felt the rage, the pain, the absolute, unshakable conviction that was the Slayer's entire being. And in that moment, the Emperor understood. You have already seen it all. The Slayer saw the Emperor's grand, tragic story not as a call to arms, but as the ultimate, unforgivable failure. The Emperor was a king who had failed his sons, a god who had failed his people, a shield that had broken and allowed the darkness to pour in. He sat on his throne and he talked. He waited. He sacrificed. The Slayer did not talk. He did not wait. He acted. He saw the Emperor's grand, complex, galaxy-spanning strategy against the Chaos Gods as a waste of time, a futile, defensive posture. The Emperor's way was to hold the line, to endure, to suffer for all eternity, a slow, agonizing defeat. The Slayer's way was to find the source, to charge the line, to rip and tear until the source was destroyed. Their divine purposes were irreconcilable. They were both anathema to chaos. But one was a shield, the other was a sword, and the sword saw the shield as nothing more than a coward's excuse. The Slayer raised his head, his helmet's visor seeming to burn with a new, cold, green fire. He had his answer. This Emperor was just another king, another failure, another talking corpse, just like the ones he had seen in Argent D'Nur, promising salvation but delivering only stagnation and death. He had no interest in this. It was in that moment of absolute ideological stalemate that a new, raw, and wonderfully simple signal flared in the Slayer's consciousness. It was not a lure. It was real. A psychic scream of pure, unadulterated, and utterly familiar rage. A beacon of bloodlust and slaughter, erupting from a war zone 100 sectors away. Angron, the daemon primarch of the World Eaters, summoned by some desperate cult, had just breached reality. The Slayer felt it. A real demon, a real target, a tangible, screaming, blood-soaked monster that he could punch, that he could kill. He turned his back on the golden throne. The act was so sudden, so absolute in its contempt, that the very air in the sanctum seemed to freeze. He turned his back on the God-Emperor of mankind, on the master of all humanity, on the being who had just bared his very soul. He turned his back on the talking corpse, the failed king, the pathetic, agonizing distraction. Wait, we cannot. The emperor's voice, for the first time in 10,000 years, held a flicker of something new. Not anger, not command, but pure, unadulterated surprise. The slayer began to walk. He strode down the great black causeway, his heavy boots thudding, his purpose renewed. He had a real demon to kill. He marched out of the Sanctum Imperialis. He strode past the kneeling, terrified, and utterly confused forms of Kryptman and Matthias. He walked past the stunned, silent, golden wall of the Adeptus Custodes. He was a green comet, his path reset, his fury refocused. He would find a ship, he would find a path, and he would go and kill the source of that new, wonderful, screaming signal. He left a terrified, confused, and utterly broken Imperium in his wake. And on the golden throne, the Emperor of mankind sat in the echoing silence of his own vast chamber. The anomaly was gone. His desperate gambit had failed. His ultimate weapon had just walked away, disgusted. But as the Emperor watched the green, rage-fueled star begin its new journey across his galaxy, a new, cold, and unfamiliar thought flickered in the dying embers of his ancient mind. He had failed to control it. But he had, perhaps, just successfully aimed it. The Slayer's crusade continued.